Night, what you see here, ladies and gentlemen, is the key success. And I do have it, and you might have it too. Let me first and foremost see and hear where you're from. If you can hear and see me, if the video stream is okay. We again, Facebook is a little shitty because this changed the streaming setup. So I hope you can actually see me. Let me quickly check that. And also, today's topic is about how do you actually go from an idea, right, to an actual application. So the stream here seems broken. Right. So give me a second here. So now let's see. The stream should be live. Okay. All right. Can you see me now? Right. Please let me know in the chat. And we'll start from the top, right? Today is about how do you actually build something, how are the professionals building things, and the things that we're talking about is of course software. And there is a structure to that, right? There is definitely a structure to that. You might not think about that because I have a random idea. I'll just start writing some code. But everyone that tried to do that, you run into issues, right? You run into definite issues. So today we talk about how to actually do this with the right process and a good friend, the key to success, right? Because very often, this is what I hear very often, right, when I talk to people first time. So, I kind of understand some coding basics. I've learned some stuff, but when I try to do something by myself, I don't know how to do that. Right? And if that idea of building something just all alone from scratch, right? If that gives you an anxiety of some sort, then this live class is for you, right? So what I usually do in this live class as well, if you have some good application ideas, some cool software ideas, then drop them in the chat now, because then I will use that as an example, right? We have a few steps to go through from idea to product. And if you have a cool application idea, drop it in the chat and I will use that specific idea, your idea, and I'll tell you in each step how to do that specifically for your application, right? Also, let me know, how confident do you feel when it comes to building your own thing? Is it like, oh shit, I have absolutely zero idea. I don't even know, right? Or so, yeah, pretty confident, but or maybe you're already building something by yourself and you stuck, right? So what we're gonna do here is that after this live class, you will have a definite action plan on how to approach that whole endeavor, right? And the goal is that you know exactly what you need to do and also in which order to actually build something, okay? So this is for you. Again, if you understand some concepts, maybe you've done some exercises, done a little lead code or whatever, but you can't really build something by yourself. This is also interesting for you if you're a complete beginner and you just want to know how to do it properly, right? Because those things we talk about, if you do it that way, the right way, you learn much faster, and I mean, less pain. It's going to be less painful. And at this stage, I'm going to give you a step-by-step approach here. That only works if you actually take it seriously, if you actually do it. If you're not ready to do that, then do yourself a favor, go to YouTube, watch something else, okay? Because those are the actual steps that we use with our clients, so they can build their first application from scratch. So in the end, right, if you want to make the best of it and have me and my team help you personally with that, you can reach out to me, okay? You can just talk to me. I'll help you, okay? And that the thing is, building a software product or an application, right? It is like solving a puzzle, right? And there's a system. Like if you just solve a puzzle, there's a system to it. And somebody that knows about the system will just put in the corner pieces first and work away from there. Somebody that doesn't know about the system will just compare puzzle pieces, will take forever, right? Or if you take other things, like all the things, the procedures to that. That Rubik's Cube, I'm not fast at that, right? But that is solved because I know how to solve it, right? And maybe I don't at this point in time. But that's not the point, ladies and gentlemen. I have a strategy to solve this, right? I'll solve it later. But if you don't know how to solve it, you're fucked. Right? You're just fucked. Okay, so I've been involved in really huge projects, right? With dozens of developers, years of development cycles, right? All the do that, loads of planning and structuring and meetings. So got the meetings, and you don't really need all of that, right? But the process is still the same. So I distilled that process down for you so you can apply it to your own one-man show. And that's something, this is why we have this live stream as well. There is not really much information about it. You can find all the, how to code X, Y, Z, but nobody really talks about, how do you approach a bigger project, right? Doesn't have to be super big, but a proper piece of software. And that's also something I personally never thought about when I was writing my first project, right? When I was just dabbling around as a teenager. And I only really learned about that when I got my first real software engineering job, right? And suddenly, my eyes open, right? I said, oh, God dang it, of course, doing those things a certain way makes life so much easier. So if you think that's something you'd also like to learn, then let me know in the chat. If you say, hey, weird Austrian man, shut the fuck up, you can also tell me that. But today it's simple, 7 simple steps, right? And if you adhere to those 7 simple steps, then you always know what to do. They're simple and clear. Maybe you haven't heard about them, that's fine. So be ready to take some notes, and stick to them. You need to actually do it. All the things that I'm telling you. Okay? So, a question for you, dear viewer. What do you think? What do you need to do apart from actually coding, right? From actually writing code, what do you think you need to do to build software, right? I mean, you gotta write some code at some point, but what else? Or what were you trying to do and still have problems with, right? Structuring, or just simply beginning. Let me know in the chat. It's an interactive kind of thing, right? So, and while you think about that and give your opinions in chat, I'm looking at the chat. I'll tell you what's what. All right, I'll tell you what's what. Step number 1, and that should be obvious, right? But sometimes it isn't quite obvious. Step 1. What should this application actually do? Right? Some people already fail on step 1. I'll give you some examples in a minute, but you need to very clearly define what you actually are trying to build. Right? You can't just have a general headline. Right? So you can't just, my project is Tinder for dogs. That's a headline. That's fine, right? But you need to actually specify, dig deeper, what that thing should actually do. And you need to write that down in the document before you even think about how you would build it, right? So really, if you have your idea, you need to write 1 page describing the actual functionality of the application. And at this stage, do yourself a favor. Do not think about implementation. David, don't write pseudocode at this stage. Okay? I got you. Don't do that. I see your comment, right? Don't think about implementation. That's really important because that will hinder your process. You just need to think about what the thing should be doing in the end. Okay? Our fully okay. Okay, you got it, David. You got it. Right? So dog for Tinder. In the document, you write all the things that it does. So it allows users to match with other users. Users have accounts. accounts have images, la-di-da, right? All the things. Then you also describe the process itself, right? So user gets displayed other dogs. You can select if they're interested. If two accounts are mutually interested, they notify each other, la-di-da-di-da. You need to actually think about it and write that down. If you don't have that, you're lost in step one already. And you need to write it down so you don't lose track on what you are actually trying to build, okay? Because you'll lose track on a bigger project, right? And again, don't worry about the design at this point. Don't worry about the user interface. This is the last step, right? Because it's not important. No matter what you think, UI is not important. So, because what would you rather use? An application that looks super cool, looks very nice, but it doesn't work. Or do you prefer an application that looks a bit shit, but actually provides value? Right? Everybody knows. You know the answer. Okay? So you write all of those down as specific as possible. You don't think about implementation. You don't think about user interface and all the good stuff. Right? So you have the document, and that document might change over time. Right? This is fine. But you need your general map. You need your bird's eye view before you go to the next step. And that brings me to step number 2. You need to figure out what data does this application actually need to handle, right? And where do you get it? So we stick with the idea, and the answer here is not, oh, need dogs. You kind of do, but that's, again, not specific enough. Not specific enough. What actual data do you need to handle? Right? What data goes in, what data goes out? Data in might be something like dog's name, user's name, biotext, age, list of pictures, email address, whatever, right? And you write that down in your document, or maybe in the next document, right? So that's all the data that goes in. Then you need to think, okay, what data comes out of your app? Might be similar, right? But maybe it also sends emails, maybe it does notifications, right? Maybe whatever. All the things that go out of the application. And you need to be, again, very precise. What data comes in, what data goes out. Another important part, where do you actually get that data, right? In this example, probably most of the data will come from the user, okay? Right? The user entered the details. But you have some other data you need to handle, right? Maybe you have a selection of dog breeds. Now you need to go research where do you find the list of common dog breeds. And that's just Googling. You should be looking for some kind of API, maybe some other kind of machine readable format. You find a CSV, you find a JSON, you find an Excel sheet, it doesn't really matter, right? And you think, but I can just type it myself. I can just type the dog breeds myself. Yeah, you could. But really, at some point, this is not a valuable approach. Yeah, okay. And then your list of cities, where you live. Do you also like type that personally and sit there and type a list of city names? No, you're not gonna do that, right? So you also want an external source that is machine readable, so it kind of automatically find a good source for that. And really, that's just Googling. And depending on what you're going to find, at this stage, it might affect your data structures, right? So this is why you need to do this step right now here in step 2. Because as soon as you have a good idea of what kind of data your app needs to handle, right? Then, only if you have that overview, it's time for step number 3, which is maybe annoying, but it helps you with step number 4. So you need to do it. You need to logically group your data points now. What do I mean by that? You just assembled all kinds of data that your app is going to use, right? Inputs, outputs. Now it's time to structure that data. And you can do this in multiple ways. Either you just start writing the next document, maybe you do an Excel sheet, maybe you take a piece of paper and draw in there, right? I'm old. I just like to just to take a piece of paper and write on it. Whatever floats your boat. So what do you actually do here? You group things that belong together. And again, this is a very simple step, but you need to do it carefully and precisely. It always boils down to this. So let's say a user has an assigned email address and a username and multiple dogs. Right? All of those data points belong to the user. And the dog itself have a name and an age and a bunch of pictures, and the breed category and so on. So all of those belong to the dog, right? And then you have a notification, and then notification might have a date, have a text, headline, maybe a category, right? So all of those data points belong to the notification, right? So you just logically group the things together. And you write those down, or you draw a diagram, or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And quick reminder, at this stage, you haven't written one single line of code. Nothing. Right? Nothing. Okay, so now you organized and grouped your things. Now it's time to try and find the data types of that particular data you want to store. Right? So again, you think about that for a second and say, okay, a dog's name is going to be a string, a dog's birthday, it might be of the date, time, data type, right? And you just write it next to it, next to the things you just grouped. Right? And then you have that on a piece of paper. And then only then it's time for step number 4. You actually write a teeny bit of code, teeny bit, and you just create your classes. You write some classes, right? And you already made a blueprint for that in the last step. So now you sit down and create a class for everything that you found out in the last step. So user class, dog class, notification class, sorry, and whatever you have, email class, and then the fields in that class, you already figured out in step 4. So that's now a super easy task, because at that point everything is more or less already there. So you do this again. It's a very simple task. You're just looking at your crudely drawn picture and you translate it into code. And then you can pat yourself on the back and say, hey, look, cool beans, look at me, that wasn't hard. I already have my data structures in place. Right? Cool. What was the next step? Step number 5, you create test data, you create mock data. Because you already have your classes, you have your data structure, you have that in place. Now you should build a few mock objects, right? You fill those data structures with some made up data, basically, right? And that data should be as realistic as possible, right? Because you're going to use them. It's not like just mashing the keyboard, but realistic looking data. And the idea here is that you have a bunch of made up users, a bunch of made up dogs, and so on, that you can later test the implementation to see if it actually works, right? And again, if you've done the previous steps and now you're in this step, you have a pretty simple task at hand, because you're just making up dog names at this point. You can do that, right? And as soon as you have a bunch of those, it's time for the next steps, right? Step number 6, you create your first method, right? Maybe you remember in the beginning, you figure out what the application should actually do. And you don't remember because you've written it down. Now it's time to build one of those core functionalities. So you just build a simple method, right? For example, to see if 2 dogs would be a match, right? A method where I can input 2 dog objects and it tells you if they're a match or not. Boolean return, whatever, right? So you build that, and then you feed into that method the exact made up data that you have from the previous step, right? So you can get a feeling if the thing actually works. And if it doesn't, you definitely need, where to look, right? You know where to go bug hunting in exactly that one method that you're currently building. And you work on that until it behaves as expected. Okay? And then it's just a matter of building the next method that can handle your fake data from the previous step. Right? And you do this until you have the fundamental functionality tested and work. Right? But this is always a very small and very scoped effort. Right? Because your data is okay, your data structure is okay. You just this one method that you're currently building might be fucky. You can unfuck that, right? And you do this for your main functionality. Okay. So now we already arrived at step number 7. Last step. You actually build a user interface if your application actually needs it. Huh? Because at that point, you have all your battleships in place. You have your data structures, you have your tested functionality, and you already know it works because you tested it, with your made up data. Now, in the last step, you decide on some kind of UI framework, right? And use that to display and get the data from the user in this case and call those methods that you just written from the last step, right? And you know what's great? By the time you do this, you already know, okay, data structures make sense. My logic does work. So you don't have to worry about that anymore, okay? You just now have the task of making it look pretty. So if now something doesn't behave right, if something doesn't display right, whatever, you know that you just need to look at the UI code that you're currently building, right? All the other things are already known good. And that's pretty neat. If you always know to look that you always know to look. You always know where to look. That's it. You always know where to look if something doesn't work as expected, right? Very focused, small effort. And suddenly, like if you've done this, you suddenly have an application. That's it. Congratulations, congratulations. That's really it. It's very simple steps to take, right? Very simple. But if you follow them, you'll always know what to do, right? I've just guided you through the whole process. You know that from one step to the next, there was not a huge ambiguity between those, right? So let's quickly run through that again, right? So numero uno, you define what your application should actually do. That's really the most important thing ever, right? Number two, what data does it need, right? How is that data grouped logically? From that, you write class definitions, then you write test data, then you create your methods and test them, right? And as the last but final step, you slap a user interface on top of it, right? And that's literally how every piece of software is built, good software, right? That's literally the way we do it with our clients. Way more in detail. I can tell you the whole thing, right? What we do with my clients in 20 minutes. But those are the exact steps that bring you from a random general idea to an actual application, to an actual minimum viable product that's useful, right? And one step always builds on top of the other. And there's not much uncertainty between those steps, right? If you disagree, leave me a comment, right? But everybody that I've told this, right? You probably agree. It sounds logical, right? It doesn't make sense. If it sounds logical to you, and you feel like you want to take these exact steps, build your own application, right? And you just want to make sure that you do everything right, which is fine, right? Then you can write 7 steps into the comments right now, and I will personally reach out to you, and we'll figure out how to exactly do that for your specific application idea, right? If you want to do this by yourself, this is fine, right? It's fine, but applying this simple system will set you up to actually learn how to solve real world problems, right? And that's what we programmers do. That's what we get paid for. Huh? And doing it in that way that I just described to you, that's really the closest you can get to getting real world experience without actually working as a software developer, right? Let it sink in. It does work. And I'm doing this because I've seen so many people that genuinely they want to learn to program and they're being discouraged, right? And it's not because programming is hard. It isn't. But because very often there's no clear guidance on what to do, when to do it, and in which order to do it, right? And that's just extremely hard to figure out by yourself. Right? It's extremely hard if you have never done this, how to build something more complex on your own. And so many people have just quit for all the wrong reasons. So if you want some help, right, I'm here. Reach out to me. I'll help you. I'll help you, my man or woman. Doesn't matter. And I'll have a quick look at the chats here. David asks, is it just for OOP? OOP, like it's not like for everybody that doesn't know what that means. Object-oriented programming. It's not like where I say, hey, I'll build my code procedural and I'll build it object-oriented, right? There is a gradient, right? Going full balls to the wall object-oriented is not always a good idea. In between thing where you have your object like docs and notifications, that totally makes sense, right? So it is the same approach for any type of program you do, but literally you're all beginners. You shouldn't concern yourself with those details at this point. Trust me, it doesn't make sense. And also David asked, is this the case for web pages too? Work on the HTML, CSS, whatever, after the database went back at 100%. 100%. Right? Because functionality, like that's the whole point of software, right? Because it does something useful. And that should be the guideline for how you write your code. And then on top of that, you build in a web page, you do some front end framework if you want, right? But if you approach it front end first, UI first, then you feel good because it looks nice, but it doesn't work. And the problem is then if you trickle down your data structures from that, your data structure is going to be shit. And if you had shit internal data structures, the mechanism that actually does the work is going to be shit, right? So you always need to build from functionality aspect upwards. If you do it the wrong way, and this is also a problem because many people start learning with HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript, it's bad because in a more complex project, it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck hard, right? It's gonna really, really suck because now you're in the backend in the database and all that, and you're trying to conceptualize the thing, right? The data. And that's gonna be hard because data structures that are easy to work with, like from a programming point, look very different than something that is easy to interact with, right? So easy to see for the user or easy to input for the user, right? Very different ways of structuring it. And one will influence the other always, right? That's how it is. But you primarily want data structures that you can program with easy. And then in your front end, whatever UI, you prepare the data to be nice to look at. This is like a translation step in there. If you build it the wrong way around, you're gonna have a bad time. Trust me. Many people do it like this. It's horrible, and you can get away with this with a very small, stupid project, but you really can't get away with this at a reasonable level of complexity, right? So that's that. I hope that answers your question. I don't see any more questions here. You're still here, right? I see a bunch of people still watching. Take this to heart, like do it properly. Because if you don't, it just takes so much more effort, takes so much longer. You'll get frustrated. And the worst thing that could happen is that because you're so frustrated, you give up, right? Trust me on this. If you do it right, the frustration is lower. You will not give up and you will actually reach your goal. Most of you probably are here to learn this, to be good enough to get paid for that. And there's some effort involved. Just do it the right way. It's gonna be quicker, it's gonna be less painful, and the quicker and less painful it is, the higher is your probability that you actually see it through the end. Okay? Always keep that in mind. Right? Okay. So that's my motivational speech for today. No more questions are here. It was nice of you all for being here. See you in the Facebook group. If you're on LinkedIn, see you on LinkedIn. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen.